I'm assuming the MSX wasn't powerful enough to give these guys joints in their legs or something, because none of them can seem to bend down and check under things. Greetings, fellow people, it is I, Jag. If you're coming to this video as a newcomer, welcome to the average Canonical Metal Gear Retrospective, and all of you coming from my previous video on Metal Gear for the MSX, welcome back. No need to dawdle around, as I did enough of that playing the first game. The first Metal Gear game was a success, especially the NES version. Due to this, Konami commissioned the second game for production, Snake's Revenge, an odd title for several reasons. One, it was exclusive to the NES, with no version coming to the home platform of the MSX. Two, it's called Snake's Revenge, even though Snake has nothing to revenge, seeing as he was undoubtedly the winner in the last game. And three, Hideo Kojima, the father of Metal Gear, had absolutely nothing to do with it. Yes, so Kojima, perhaps feeling slightly jaded over the fact, created the actual series sequel to Metal Gear. It was exclusive for the MSX and released in 1990, Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake. It was a sequel in every way a sequel should be. It looks better, plays better, and thankfully sounds better, as there are more than a half a dozen tracks as opposed to the original games too. While some people may have a special place for Snake's Revenge in their hearts, there is no denying that Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake is the proper sequel, and I would say actual start as to what Metal Gear is about. While the first game introduced some iconic characters, items, and general gameplay, Metal Gear 2 takes everything the previous game did, at least conceptually well, and expands on it, and makes it unique, making it Metal Gear. For those who don't want spoilers about this game, please skip to the time above. While not as over the top as Metal Gear gets, this game is still far more expansive than the first in its narrative. Snake crawls up from the shadows on a one-person sneaking mission once again. He receives a call from his new Foxhound commander, Roy Campbell. The objective of this mission is to infiltrate Zanzibar Land. Snake is to rescue Dr. Keo Marv, a scientist who is claimed to have created an alternative to oil called Oilix. Oilix is claimed to be vastly superior to traditional energy sources. However, on his way to show his findings to the US, he was captured by soldiers of Zanzibar Land. The group now has control over the creator of a new energy source in addition to a stockpile of nuclear weapons, so the free world is now hostage to this new superpower. Snake is here to deal with the weapons of mass destruction and to save Dr. Marv from the clutches of Zanzibar Land. Through his communication device, Snake is again connected with a few individuals during his mission. Holly White is a CIA operative who, under the guise of a journalist, has infiltrated and remained in Zanzibar Land for over a month. So she's the one that knows about the inner workings of the base. She gets the most screen time out of all of Snake's confidants and has the most significance. There is also McDonald Miller, George Kassler, and Joseph Norden. They all help out in various ways, giving hints and whatnot, though honestly you'll probably only interact with them a few times each. Snake finds Dr. Marv using a tracking device placed in the doctor's tooth. However, the enemy, unbeknownst to Snake, confiscated the device and used it to lure Snake into a trap. Snake then has to fight this black ninja who, upon defeat, is revealed to be Kyle Schneider, the resistance leader from Metal Gear 1. This puzzles Snake, as Schneider had once helped him in his previous adventure. It turns out that after Snake left Outer Heaven and notified his superiors of the destruction of Metal Gear, NATO ordered an airstrike on the area to ensure nothing remained from the incident. There were resistance members, prisoners of Outer Heaven, and women and children wiped from the face of the planet by this action. This naturally bothered Schneider, as he saw NATO's careless and cold nature as they wiped out many of his comrades, as well as innocent bystanders. He then explains that in Zanzibar Land, he found a home, a family per se, which is why he was essentially working with the bad guys now. Schneider, however, knowing Snake didn't mean for the domino effect of his actions to do as much harm as they did, tells Snake how to find the doctor before dying from his wounds. Snake follows a soldier through the jungle to find Dr. Marv. When he makes it to this structure, he hears tapping on the wall, which he recognizes as a tap code, a secret way of disclosing a communication frequency. When he tunes into the frequency, it's not Dr. Marv who's on the other side, but Dr. Petrovic, the doctor from the previous game. Petrovic explains that Marv and he were friends and they were both captured together. Petrovic explains that Marv was escorted some time ago to be interrogated about his research in the hopes he'll give up the data to give Zanzibar Land a way of engineering oilix. With things bad enough as is, Petrovic reveals that Zanzibar Land also has a Metal Gear, which surpasses the one that Snake fought previously. Snake has to find his way around Zanzibar Land to find Dr. Keo Marv before he breaks under interrogation. During Snake's wanderings, he gets a call from Holly saying she made contact with Marv, however, she was captured in the process. After Snake rescues her, she tells him that Marv managed to release a bird with a message strapped to its leg. After Snake chases the bird around on a roof of one of the buildings, he finds the letter and decodes it as a frequency. He's able to contact Marv, though because of a language barrier, he has to find someone in the base who can communicate with Keo Marv. He is told that there is an STB agent who can speak Czech, so Snake eventually locates the agent in the woman's washroom. This agent is Natasha Markova, a woman Snake recognizes as an Olympic figure skater gold medalist. She deciphers Marv's message, and they make their way over to the convenient elevator in the woman's washroom, which leads them to a sewer system that gives them access to save Petrovic. Once they save Petrovic, they make their way through the sewers, heading in the direction of Dr. Marv's cell. They have to stop for a bit while Petrovic relieves himself, during which Snake and Natasha talk. Natasha is reminded of her mother's stories of escaping Nazis via a sewer system because of this trek through the sewers. She also confirms that she once was an Olympic figure skater Snake recognized. She fell in love with an American citizen, though when she tried to defect, the United States denied her green card at the final moment. Her failed defection caused her and her family to be stripped of their honor, and I guess the only career path for a disgraced figure skater is to become an STB agent. They eventually make it to the surface where they must cross a bridge to get to the building containing Dr. Marv. Petrovic managed to get to the other side, but while Natasha was halfway through, the bridge was destroyed via missiles from Metal Gear. Natasha is killed in the explosion and Snake is separated from Dr. Petrovic. It is then revealed the person operating Metal Gear is none other than Gray Fox. Gray Fox, respecting Snake as a former comrade of Foxhound, tells Snake to leave if Snake wants to stay alive. Seeing as Snake is the hero, he exclaims that he'll never give up, and his mission is now to avenge Natasha. Because of the bridge's destruction, the only way to make it to the other side is to procure a hang glider, make it to the roof of a nearby building, and glide over. Snake tries to do that, but is stopped in an elevator by assassins sent by Gray Fox. Once he deals with them, the elevator crashes down, forcing Snake to climb 20 floors of stairs to get to a point where he can jump off. On the other side, Snake finds Petrovic and Marv in a room, however, Marv is now dead. Petrovic says that the oilix plans are on the other side of the locker. Before Snake can figure out a way to get past the locker, Holly contacts Snake and warns him about Petrovic. After the Outer Heaven incident, the scientific community viewed Petrovic and his Metal Gear research as crazy and unethical. Stripped of his honor, Petrovic turned to Zanzibar Land to continue his research and likely to soothe his ego. Petrovic was the one who notified Gray Fox when they were initially crossing the bridge, as well as killing Dr. Marv since he wouldn't give up the plans for oilix. Snake quickly deals with the deranged doctor. With Natasha's dying breath, she gave Snake a brooch, which changed shape via extreme temperatures. Snake cools the key down in order for it to form the shape of the lock of the locker, in which an MSX cartridge with oilix research is stored. After that, Snake falls down a trapdoor of some kind that leads him to face Metal Gear. Snake, exploding the legs like last time, manages to defeat the Metal Gear piloted by Gray Fox. In the explosion, Snake's gear is burnt to a crisp, leaving him with nothing as he has a good old-fashioned fist fight with Gray Fox, who also managed to survive the explosion. Snake beats Grey Fox, though not enough to stop Grey Fox from giving a long death speech. So like many other characters in this game, Grey Fox was displeased with the West in many ways. He tried to get his girlfriend over into America, though unfortunately they rejected her at the last minute. In addition, he followed the leader of Zanzibar land as he gave Grey Fox a purpose for existing. Grey Fox explains how a soldier's place is on the battlefield, and people like Grey Fox and Snake, they need military conflict to have meaning in their life. Grey Fox also explains how Big Boss, the leader of Zanzibar land, saved him on multiple occasions, and his respect for the man was why he followed him, even if it meant to his death. It's also revealed that his girlfriend was Natasha, which stings even more seeing as how he accidentally killed the woman he loved under Big Boss's orders. Snake then confronts the man in charge, Big Boss. While it was technically revealed much earlier in the game, you now have confirmation that Big Boss in fact didn't die back in Outer Heaven, and he was once again the mastermind behind this situation. He gives Snake an expanded version of Grey Fox's speech on the soldier's meaning. Soldiers, as soon as there is peace, lose all their meaning, as once you become a soldier, you can't return to a peaceful existence. Big Boss explains that the constant cycle of war is so that his soldiers never cease to have meaning. Throughout Zanzibar land, there are children who are very fond of Big Boss, calling him things like Uncle. He plans to use those war-orphaned children as soldiers so that they'll have meaning, and so that there is an endless cycle and supply of soldiers. Horrified by the idea, Snake rejects Big Boss's idea and claims that peace is obtainable, and by dealing with Big Boss, Snake can escape the nightmare of the man who caused him so much pain. Snake then creates a makeshift flamethrower and reduces Big Boss to ash. Snake calls in a chopper for evacuation and makes a rendezvous with Holly. They make their daring escape to the evac point as Zanzibar land soldiers tail closely behind. The chase turns into a fight, however, as the duo are soon cornered. Snake tries to fight off the enemy for as long as he can before he inevitably runs out of ammo. While things seem bleakest with their backs against the wall, the chopper arrives in the nick of time and the pair escape from Zanzibar land. Snake then gives the MSX cartridge to Roy Campbell, and before Campbell can congratulate Snake on a mission well done, Snake disappears, going to live out his days in peace with the threat of Big Boss and Metal Gear behind him. At least that would be the case if there weren't another 3 games of Solid Snake's journey. For comparison, the summary of the last game was around 2 paragraphs in my script. This one was around 10 paragraphs. More dialogue and story set pieces happen in this game compared to the original MSX game. I think this is also helped by the fact that the actual locations in this game feel far more connected and fleshed out as opposed to the first game, where I felt everything just kind of blended together as a blob of events that kind of happened but didn't really matter. Because of the extra definition in areas and dialogue conversations, it's much easier to follow along and care about the narrative. Yes, this game is a visual spectacle compared to the first game. While the original had enemies and areas that looked relatively samey and honestly pretty bland, this game steps up in the visual department tenfold. With the other game, if you gave me a screenshot of gameplay, I would struggle to be able to tell you its location, while I would have a much easier time with this game's areas. This, as well as other gameplay tweaks, made it so playing this game was far more enjoyable than the last game, and while I did consult a guide on a few occasions, I was able to play through most of the game using my own intuition and knowledge I found along the way. One large improvement that I'm sure you've been able to see throughout the footage shown thus far is the use of a radar. Snake's radar describes 9 screens around Snake and the enemy's locations in it. This helps both with navigation as well as scouting ahead in terms of enemy formations. This was a godsend, as it was possible in the last game to enter a screen transition and then immediately get spotted because you didn't know an enemy would be staring directly at you if you entered from a particular place. Like most improvements in this game, its inclusion fixes a problem in the last game, but adds something to it so that it doesn't make the game unfairly easy. If you get caught, the enemy will interfere with your radar signal, meaning you'll be without it until you can exit the alert start phase. If you're unfamiliar with an area, this can cause a sense of panic as you're likely running from the enemy and you don't know what obstacles are up ahead and you need a good place to hide. Yes, unlike the first game, you can actually hide in this game. Through the revolutionary use of Snake's knees, he can now crouch down and crawl on the ground. This naturally causes Snake to be slower, but this also allows him to crawl under cracks to advance through areas or to hide from enemies. Not having any kind of crouch/crawl or hiding places at all in the original game always felt jarring to me, seeing as how Metal Gear is known for its stealth. So I'm glad it only took till the second entry for them to add it. One issue in this game is that crouching is a 2-button combination. It's a combination of the punch and shoot buttons, acting as they did in the previous game. If you don't press the buttons in the proper order, or do it in a bad spot, you might punch a wall or shoot your gun, alerting the guards, even though you wanted to crouch down as the enemy was likely approaching. Yes, enemies in this game react to sound. Punching a wall or shooting your gun can alert them and have them respond in one form or another. In theory, you can use this to manipulate the enemy AI into possibly creating an opening, though I mostly experienced it as more of an obstacle to staying inconspicuous. This extends to the type of floor you walk on. For certain surfaces like grates or squeaky sand, stepping over them usually will cause noise that will attract guards. To mitigate the sound, you have to crawl over these surfaces. Again, this primarily serves to make the game more challenging, but I welcome this change because of the better game balance. The enemy's eyes have also been upgraded with the gift of peripheral vision. Yes, unlike the last game where they seem to be wearing blinders all the time, this game they have a much more realistic peripheral vision, meaning you can't abuse the enemy AI like you could in the last game. You'll see a notification where your radar used to be when you get spotted. When red with danger, it means enemies know you're there, and they will pour on screen from every direction to try and deal with you. If you manage to escape them, usually by crossing into another screen and hiding from an enemy's line of sight, then you'll enter the yellow evasion status. This means the enemy knows you're nearby, though if you manage to remain hidden by the time the timer crawls to 0, then all the enemies in the area will evacuate from the current screen, and the radar will return. These tweaks to the stealth mechanics are one, if not the most significant reason why this game is far superior, in my opinion, to the first. The first game felt like the difficulty constantly shifted between being dully easy or painstakingly obtuse. This can also extend to the game and the items in the game. The gameplay loops are largely the same between the games, though the executions on how these games operate are vast in difference in most areas. The gameplay loop is to sneak around to find items for other areas that will allow you to find more items, which will eventually lead you to having the item to face the final boss. Metal Gear 1 suffered from arbitrary and random difficulty. Explode this wall to proceed with the game. Sneak past these enemies lest you get destroyed by the hive mind. Backtrack to this place to get this item, and sift through all of your keycards to open one door before walking a few meters to the next door before you need to sift through your keycards again. I felt like the game was just an endless cycle of similar looking rooms, similar stakes, and the same music. And honestly, by the end of it, I knew I was constantly wasting my time. While not all of these issues were fixed in this release, they're still leagues better. While a guide for some of this game is occasionally helpful, there were very few moments where I felt I absolutely needed outside help to finish this game in a reasonable manner. There is far more dialogue, whether between the people on comms or the people you physically meet in Zanzibar land, that give you adequate information about what you need and what obstacles are up ahead. A case where you will need outside help is the previously mentioned tap code. Whether this was supposed to be Kojima's innovation or an anti-piracy measure, you have to look at the game's original manual to use this chart to decipher Dr. Petrovic. It's luckily the same with with every game, so you only have to look up the frequency online to find it. No decoding on your part if you don't care to do that kind of thing. While the enemies do still swarm you when you get spotted in this game, you aren't forced to fight all of them to ensure your safety. It allows for a far more balanced experience because the enemies, in combination with the limited controls and stealth gameplay, don't create as much uncomfortable friction as they did with the last game. While things like boss fights mandate combat, which isn't the most fluid still, the bosses are at least more interesting in their gimmicks and set pieces. Yes, another thing this game does so much better than the first is being memorable. So much of the previous game's rooms blended into one another, which made the act of backtracking difficult because it's hard to tell where is where and where you need to go. It's also equally boring as the music and backgrounds repeating makes it super hard to focus on the game. While there is still a lot of backtracking in this game, unfortunately, at least it's far more intuitive and understandable as to where you're going and how to get there. The act of traveling has also been streamlined, though not entirely fixed. There are still 9 key cards that work with doors that aren't labeled once again. However, once you receive card 3, 6, and 9, you can receive colored coded cards which act as either cards 1 to 3, 4 to 6, or 7 to 9. You still have to fumble through your cards and you have to go and procure the colored cards, though this slight improvement is just that, an improvement. While backtracking in this game is still just as constant as the last game, it's helped that there are some fast travel points through the base where if you hop in these trucks as a cardboard box, you're chauffeured to set locations which may be closer to where you need to go. Again, you still have to backtrack and these trucks can only deliver to particular areas, though I'm still over the moon happy that this game isn't nearly as painful as my first playthrough of Metal Gear for the MSX. One slight improvement, or change I should note, is how Snake levels up. In the original game, you had to save enough prisoners in Outer Heaven to be able to ascend to the next rank. This gains Snake more health and a greater capacity for ammo and rations. Snake still levels up in this game, though instead of finding prisoners, all you have to do is defeat a boss. I personally like this better, as it means you don't have to scour every nook and cranny multiple times to free as many prisoners as possible. In the last game, getting to the highest rank was mandatory, so for this game to remove that stress and just let you focus on the most pressing objective is a nice addition in my opinion. The last and final addition I should mention is the soundtrack. It's nothing special and more ambient than not, but there are, thankfully, more tracks than the original. While you may hear some play more than you'd like, it's way better than the original game, which ensures that Theme of Terra is burned into your memory by the end of the first hour. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake isn't perfect, though it's a blend of a far more engaging story, set pieces and characters that stick out, especially in comparison to the first game, and a gameplay loop that is perfectly serviceable and enjoyable. If you want to play this game in its purest and most authentic form, I would say go for it. There's nothing outrageously bad about this game on its own. I again used the Mr. FPGA on a CRT monitor with a keyboard as my controller for this video. If you're worried about the length of backtracking being an issue, then you can do what I did and have the option to toggle a turbo button on and off. This increases the game speed, so for the slow treks to and from locations, this can be helpful to mitigate some of the boredom. I would also suggest perhaps referencing a map every once in a while, as they label which doors require which keys or which areas hold which items, and just little things that help the pace of the game. However you play this game, it's a good enough experience as is, and I would recommend it to most people interested in the Metal Gear series. The easiest way to play this game in English is to either emulate a translation ROM or play it on Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence or Metal Gear Solid 3 HD. However, if you're not sold at this point, then perhaps this legendary entry might sway you or give you the final answer as to whether or not you want anything to do with Kojima's directing and narrative styles. I'm of course talking of the PlayStation 1 classic, Metal Gear Solid, which I will be covering in my next video for the average Canonical Metal Gear retrospective. Thank you to all those who watched till the end of this review, and I hope you enjoyed it. I was and am Jag, and I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon. Take care.